For a while now, I've been thinking about doing some bonus content. For Sundays, we're only on air 5 days a week. I knew I wanted it to be about religion and faith, but I wasn't really sure what kind of form it would take. A couple weeks ago, when President Trump announced that he was talking about putting prayer back into schools, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to discuss different kinds of faith? Some kind of comparative religion class. So I reached out to Pastor Russell Johnson from the Pursuit Northwest Church. You might remember him as the pastor who was behind the Christian rock concert that got attacked by Antifa earlier this summer. Well, we scheduled the interview, and then Charlie Kirk was assassinated. Charlie Kirk from Turning Point USA was all about his faith, and Pastor Russell knew Charlie Kirk. So we thought, hey, maybe let's do this instead of talking about faith, what faith meant to Pastor Russell, but also things he spoke about regarding faith with Charlie Kirk and what we can learn in the fallout from this tragedy. Give a listen to my interview with Pastor Russell Johnson from the Pursuit Northwest Church. We were talking about booking this interview long before what happened to our friend Charlie Kirk, long before he was assassinated. And my plan was just to have you on and talk about the differences in our faith. But I think that after the events this week, it's actually brought us all closer together. Before we get into the faith conversation, why don't we start with, you knew Charlie Kirk. You've talked to Charlie Kirk many times, I think even more than I have, because I've only interviewed him the one time and seen him at Turning Point events. Tell us what was going through your mind when you first heard about it.
I mean, I still feel like these waves of like shock and almost like disbelief. Um, yeah, probably like you, Ari, I couldn't help but see the videos of him getting murdered because they were everywhere on social media. And my gut reaction when I saw it was this has to be AI or a deep fake. There's no way they took out Charlie. It looked Hollywood-ish. It looked fake. And I just kept saying to myself, I was sitting in my office at the church, and I was, working on some other things, church related, whatever. And then all of a sudden, my phone started to blow up. Charlie's been shot, and I, I said, no, not Charlie. Well, he was at an event in Utah, not in Utah. What are we talking about? No, this isn't true. And then I saw the up close thing, and I said, This has got to be a disgusting deep fake. This is AI." I mean, I was in shock and in disbelief. And then I started getting texted by some of my friends who are in the organization, and they were saying, "Russell, it's real. People have to pray. Get your church to pray. This is a crisis." And not too many minutes after that, I heard back channels that he was gone. That it sounded like he didn't even make it to the hospital, because of the location of the shot and the loss of blood. And I mean, I just started to weep in my office. It, 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 I, it, I'm a pastor. I'm not usually like at a loss for words, but it's America changed on that day. We have crossed an invisible line. It's not the same America. Something has changed, and so I'm working on my sermon for this Sunday, trying to put these things into context. I'm going to preach a sermon called "America is at a Turning Point," and Charlie's death is not going to be in vain. But it, this has shocked me to the very core of who I am.
Yeah, and I don't want to pretend like I knew Charlie better than I did. I didn't know him very well, but he had that quality about him that after you spoke to him, and the only time I really had a long conversation with him, in fact, we were setting up with his people to have a conversation like you and I are having about faith. And that would have been the first time in 5 years I'd had a chance to sit down with him. But you walked away always feeling like he was your best friend, and that he was somebody you could have a connection with. In fact, we talked about the next time he was in Seattle, possibly him coming to my house for Sabbath, for Shabbos, because he had talked in the last interview about how much he loved that. And he was making fun of me for not having enough kids because I only have three and I'm from a family of nine. And it was a whole, you really felt like you were close with the guy. Now, we do what we do best when we're in that kind of situation. I went on the radio and I go off about everything and try and give people some comfort, but you did something else in an hour, maybe. You organized 300 people in Westlake Center in the heart of, I'd say for lack of better words, Satan's gutter.
Right.
Downtown Seattle with what's going on right now. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is right now. And you pulled off this amazing, amazing service where even I'm not Christian, but I'm sitting there looking at it and I'm looking at it from the perspective of here's the difference between my faith and their faith, but we're all praying for the same kind of thing. It was
Right.
truly an emotional experience. While you were preaching up there, you were clearly very, very emotional. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, for me, it's um, kind of this sense of, and I think this verse is from the Torah, from one of the prophets, how God is close to the broken and to the contrite. A bruised reed he will not break. And this idea that in times of distress and in times of mourning, that God in one way or another wraps his arms around his people. And I feel like when crisis hits, there's really one of two decisions people are going to make. They're either going to scatter, or they're going to gather. The old adage, the old axiom: you strike the shepherd and the sheep scatter. This was an opportunity for people of faith and like-minded values to come together and say, "Hey, actually, we're not going to cower in fear. You're not going to silence our voice. You're not going to scare conservatives into staying home." And you were at the same rally as me, while we're commemorating the life of Charlie and talking about the values that he espoused and why we still believe in the hope of America and why we still have faith in God even after tragic events like this. You have people walking by yelling, F Charlie, Charlie's burning in hell, free Palestine, all of this type of vitriol. Why? For the high crime of people of faith coming together to mourn one of their fallen brothers. And for me, it's like that's why I was there. I want to I want to send a message to the media establishment in Seattle. I want to send a message to the region, that you might be able to take one of us out, but there's 1,000 more who are going to rise up with even more confidence and more courage. Um, because we owe it to our kids to pass them a better country than the one that we inherited. And that political violence and cowardice assassinations don't get to cause us to run and hide in the cave. Kind of like Elijah after his big victory on Mount Carmel is now in the cave saying, "I'm all alone. I'm the only prophet left. I'd just rather die." And the Lord has to speak to him and say, "Take a nap, eat some food. You're going to be okay." There's thousands who haven't bowed their knee to Baal. And I feel like that's the message that I wanted to send, like this message of like belligerent hope, that this makes us stronger if we respond right and we keep our eyes to the hills for whence our help comes from. Our help comes from the Lord. And um, and not in a way to hit like fast forward on the tragedy or to like say, "Oh, it's not a big deal." No, it's a huge deal. This will forever change the landscape of the fabric of America, but I believe it can change it for the better, and it can inspire a new generation of bold, free thinkers, free speech advocates, followers of God, who are unafraid and unapologetic just to tell the truth. Charlie, we have incendiary flamethrowers on both the far left and the far right. Charlie wasn't that. He was a nuanced thinker. He was deep. He was intellectual. He was sharp. He engaged, in my estimation, a lot of the ways like Ben Shapiro would. He didn't attack the person, he attacked the idea. And what frustrated Charlie's opponents is that Charlie made sense. It's that he would like break down all of these concepts. I mean, you saw the same videos, college campus, kid after kid after kid. And he would say, well, that's why this doesn't make sense. And this is why we believe in life is worthy of protecting in the womb. And this is why we believe in Israel being able to defeat their enemies. And, this is why we believe in the American experiment and the West. And um, they can't silence Charlie's voice because now we carry that on like 1,000 times more amplified, more loud, more proud than ever before. But I think I was feeling this wave of emotions. There's part of you that just wants to weep. And I think that's appropriate. You mourn with those who mourn, but the scriptures say that sorrow may last for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And this idea that joy comes in the morning because we know that God has the final say, that God is the final arbitrator of the record of history, and He has a way of turning things around. Like even in the narrative of Job, after all Job loses, and then like Job, like in an act of defiant hope, is like, I know my Redeemer lives, and one day He will walk on the earth. I've heard it with my ears, and now I will see it with my eyes. And for me, it's like, you know, if the devil and darkness and spiritually dark forces thought that this was going to be the thing that scared us to stay in our synagogues, stay in our churches. Hey, Ari, you better not show up and say anything. Hey, Russell, you better not get loud. Then, evil didn't know what it was messing with. And you would know better than me, Ari, obviously, because of your background and your history. But there's like this quote that I often hear from like strong, like pro-Jewish voices where they say something like, we are not the Jews who speak with shaky voices or like shaky knees. And like, that's why I wanted to include you. And that's why I wanted to include other pro-Jewish voices. And that's why we put an Israel flag right next to the American flag on stage. Like, I want these cowards to know they messed with the wrong people. And we're standing together and we're actually not backing down. We're breaking through. And to me, it was like this prophetic statement of defiant hope. We're going to mourn. We're going to pray for the family. We're going to pray for his wife and now his two children that will be raised without their biological father. We're going to call for justice for the shooter, who I understand it sounds like they just captured. But what we're not going to do is hide. What we're not going to do is cower. And it's like that same Elijah who stood against Ahab and Jezebel and contended for the nation of Israel, and fire fell and rain came back to the land. It's like we need those voices on Mount Carmel again in our region to appeal to heaven and believe for a God whose all of his promises are yes and amen. His mighty right hand is extended to his people. He is close to those who are burdened and heavy laden, and he is our help in time of need, and that's the message I wanted to send.
And I think you sent it more than you even realize. Because I don't have the biggest social media following, nothing compared to Charlie Kirk. But when I woke up the morning after the rally, I put a bunch of videos online because I wanted to cover it for the Post Millennial, and I wanted to have some articles for KVI, and I wanted to make sure I had all this stuff up and ready to go. So I needed the posts ready to go. Overnight, people who couldn't sleep, who were upset by the Charlie thing, kept scrolling and found these videos. And several of them went viral. One was everybody singing Amazing Grace at the end. One was your interview with the media beforehand, where you said, here's what's happening in Seattle. Look at the destruction here. Look what's going on here. And for calling it out, calling out the destruction that Democrat policies bring to the U.S. Charlie was shot. That one went viral. And I was blown away because I had media outlets reaching out asking if they could syndicate the content because so many people had seen it. The way I work is I know that if somebody calls my show and they're yelling at me, I'm not after them because I'm not going to convince them, but I'm after everybody who's listening. You do it
Right.
a little differently also because you're trying to save souls and you're trying to bring them in one at a time, but also you have the chance to inspire all these people. And I think you really, really did that because these videos were seen around the world because I could see the analytics of where they went. And I was just blown away by the reach that it had because if you look in the comments, it says, wow, we're seeing this in Seattle. We're seeing this in Seattle. There's hope. If we're seeing this in Seattle, there is hope nationally. Now, that's the good reaction we got. What was some of the other reaction you got afterwards?
Yeah, yeah, I forget which of the prophets said this. It may have been Isaiah, it may have been Jeremiah. But they talk about this concept in the Torah of almost dueling revivals. And by that I mean this, how at the same time that the light gets brighter, the darkness gets darker. Um, and how those two things almost grow in tangent together. And I think you're right. Like, having like a prayer rally or a prayer vigil for Charlie Kirk, like in the Bible Belt, that's awesome. And we're seeing now vigils like in all 50 states. You're seeing them in other nations, and I think that's the appropriate reaction. But when it happens in Seattle, people take note. In many ways, like Seattle has been written off by the national pundits as just a place that has been given over. And I don't even blame them for that assertion because all you have to do is look at the news that comes out of this place on a regular basis. And it's like, the feeling is like Seattle has been given over. It's like a hellhole. But there's a couple of us, me, I was born and raised in Seattle. I lived in Ballard. I went to public school in Seattle. We have a campus in Seattle right next to the University of Washington. I have a passion to see that city get turned around. And I think when stuff like this happens, we could have done the rally in Snohomish. We could have done the rally in Kirkland. I wanted to take the fight to the front of the enemy lines because the opposite side who opposes us and who functions in the highest level of identity politics and vitriol and absolute hatred, for somebody who dares to have a different opinion, their stronghold is that Seattle Metroplex region. And I think when we do something like this, even like you said, this idea of it going viral, when people see it happening in Seattle, they take note. This isn't like Dallas, Fort Worth. This isn't Tulsa. It's Seattle. And I think like A.W. Tozer, this kind of famous Christian theologian at one point, he said, a scared world needs a fearless church. And so a little courage goes a long way. I think both courage and fear, or faith and fear, are the two most contagious things on the planet. And you probably saw the same message as I did. Well, is it going to be safe? And I can't come. I'm only going to watch the live stream. Well, what if it happens to us? And I get that. I don't blame people for having that fear, but it's like somebody has to stand. And when we did that, I think it sent a shockwave through the nation where people were like, if they can stand in Seattle, I can stand in my city. And that's exactly the type of feel I wanted to create. And so, like you said, there was a lot of good feedback. A lot of your videos, even your speech you gave was excellent. I got people at my Christian church who are like, let's get Ari to preach on Sunday. And I'm like, I'll ask him, I don't know all the rules, but yeah, I love Ari too, and so,
My father, the rabbi, will find that very entertaining.
but then, some of the negative feedback was, some of their Antifa counter protesters got arrested. They assaulted, I think, Cam Higbee and, some of the different guys who were there. But they're holding signs, chanting while we're, singing Amazing Grace, lighting candles. They're chanting, F Charlie Kirk, F the Jews, Charlie Kirk is burning in hell. Of course, you saw the graffiti at Seattle Central Community College, kill all Charlie Kirks,
Yeah.
free Palestine, F Israel. And it, uh, it's funny too, because like we've done pro-Israel rallies before. You've been there. This wasn't like an expressly pro-Israel rally, although Charlie was good on that issue and stood with us strong. But it's like the same spirit. And so, these people find each other. They all come together and they function in diametric opposition to things that are good and true and charitable and altruistic. And before that event was over, um, before that event was over, I'm getting death threats on my phone. Uh, we took out Charlie and we're gonna kill you, you blankety blank Jew lover. Uh, and this will be the last time that you ever talk about the Jews and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm on stage at an event with my Jewish friends eulogizing Charlie. And apparently that's so offensive that people have to give death threats to me, my kids, my family, which I know you're no stranger to. You get those all the time. But this is a spiritual sickness. It's a darkness. It's a spiritual cancer that has metastasized amongst the extreme left. And I just thought to myself, you only catch flack when you're over the target.
Yes.
And I think that rally in Seattle, it helped strengthen the right people and it helped piss off the wrong people. And it's like for me, I operate with that mindset of like, I'm not intentionally trying to be a provocateur, but if like saying two or three nice things about like, oh, I don't know, the right of Jewish people to not be like annihilated by their enemies, if that ticks off the left so much that they've got to function in death threats, then I'm going to talk about it even louder and even more proud. And every Sunday on our stage, we have like a big screen so you can see the words for worship, and we have a pulpit, and that's it, except for two things: an American flag and an Israel flag. And after we started getting death threats, I even had some like well-intentioned people. They're like, hey, look, maybe just for the time being, we should take down the flags just so that, we can be safe. And I said, no, I'd rather preach in a bulletproof vest and leave the flags on stage. We're not letting the cowards and the fear-mongers dictate the parameters of the people of faith. And so I wasn't surprised that it stirred up the devil. It stirred up darkness. It stirred up this spiritual sickness. But that tells me we're doing the right thing and we're not backing down.
Amen. Amen. Pastor Russell Johnson from the Pursuit Northwest Church. I'm just so happy to have you as a friend. I'm so happy to have you as somebody I met through all the darkness that you mentioned. And I'm so happy you were able to join us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Always a pleasure. When there's a tragedy, we think, what lessons can we learn from this tragedy? And we saw that Turning Point USA, as of the last time I checked, went from 9,000 chapters to requests for close to 18,000 chapters in the light of Charlie Kirk's death. A lot of those people are going to be religious kids, a lot of those kids who want to be politically motivated. But there is some good that came out of this horrific, horrific tragedy. As Erica Kirk said, the movement is still building. The movement will not die. The movement will continue to grow. And that's the example that Charlie Kirk inspired. That was the turning point.